My name is Charlotte Russell, and I'm 30 years old. Last Sunday morning, I was sipping coffee in my Little Rock apartment when my phone buzzed with a voice memo from my parents. But it wasn't meant for me, it was for my sister. What I heard next made my heart freeze. They called me eccentric, said my career was a pointless hobby, and claimed no one would ever marry someone like her. Me. Their own daughter. I sat there, stunned, as their voices echoed in my head. My whole life, I believed they were my biggest cheerleaders, but this was betrayal, pure and simple. I couldn't unhear it, and I wasn't going to let it go. That moment sparked a plan, a daring, calculated move to confront them in a way they'd never forget. I'm not talking about some quiet family discussion. No, I had something much bigger in mind, something that would turn their world upside down, just like they had done to mine. What did I do? Stay tuned to find out how I made them face the truth in front of everyone who mattered. If this story hit you the way it hit me, let me know in the comments below. Growing up in Little Rock, I always thought my parents were my greatest supporters. My dad, Edward, a retired banker, was full of lectures about stability. My mom, Pamela, works in real estate, always networking, always charming clients. And then there's my sister, Paige, 2 years younger, working in media and forever the golden child. We were close, or at least I thought so. Family dinners, holidays, everything. I went out of my way for them, like when I planned Dad's 50th birthday party from scratch, transforming our backyard into a chic venue with string lights and live music. Everyone adored it. I even helped Mom with business costs when her deals fell apart, wiring her thousands without hesitation. Paige's promotion party? I handled that too, custom invites, rooftop booking, the works. It was my way of showing love, using my event planning skills to make them proud. But that voice memo shattered everything. I'd heard it on Sunday, but by Monday I was still in shock. Mom's voice came first, sharp, dismissive, speaking to my sister. "Charlotte's so eccentric," she said, as if it were something shameful. "Her little events business is so unstable. She's never going to settle down. No one would marry someone like her." Then Dad added in, his tone cold and final. "Paige, you're the one we're proud of. You've got a real career. Charlotte's just floundering." Floundering. Me. The word hit like a punch. They weren't just mocking my work, they were tearing down my entire life. I'd spent years building my company, pouring my soul into every detail, and they dismissed it as a hobby. I'd supported them, celebrated them, stood by them, and this was what they said behind my back, to Paige of all people, who had smiled at me during dinners like nothing was wrong. I replayed the memo, hoping I'd misheard. But no, every cruel word was clear. Mom went on about how Paige's job was prestigious, how she was going places. Dad even laughed, saying I'd probably end up begging them for money someday. The irony burned. I was the one who'd helped them financially. I thought about all the nights I stayed up planning their events, never charging a dime. Like when I organized a charity gala for Mom's real estate group, coordinating every vendor to make her shine. Or when Paige needed a last-minute venue for her company's launch and I pulled strings to book a sold-out hotel. I did it because I loved them, because family was supposed to stand together, but they never stood by me. The worst part wasn't that they were wrong, it was that they didn't know me at all. My business wasn't some fragile side project. It was thriving. I wasn't the chaotic, unstable dreamer they made me out to be. And that no one would marry her comment? That one cut the deepest, especially since I was engaged to someone who'd proven them wrong in every possible way. But they didn't know that either. All those years of loyalty, all the sacrifices I'd made, and they still saw me as a disappointment. My chest tightened, filled with anger and heartbreak. I wanted to call them, scream, demand answers. Why would they say this? Why to Paige? And worst of all, had she agreed with them? I didn't know. But the idea of her nodding along made my stomach twist. I sat frozen, staring at my phone with the memo still open. I could have called them out right then, but something held me back. This wasn't only about wounded pride. It was about them spinning a lie about who I was, maybe even to the rest of the family. I needed to know how far it went. Were they telling everyone I was a wreck? Was Paige in on it? The more I turned it over in my head, the more I understood I couldn't simply let this pass. I wasn't going to cry or plead for their approval. No. I was going to prove who I truly was and force them to confront the truth in a way they couldn't ignore. That memo wasn't merely betrayal. It was the opening move. I was finished being their punching bag. The next morning, I sat at my home office replaying their words. I couldn't stop thinking about how off the mark they were. I wasn't some struggling dreamer. I ran a firm, Russell Events, that pulled in $3,500,000 a year. $3,500,000, let that sink in. I'd built it from the ground up, turning an eye for detail into a business that produced high-profile events for corporations across the country. Last year alone, I produced a national tech conference in Dallas for a Fortune 500 client, coordinating 500 vendors and thousands of attendees. I'd flown to New York to oversee a charity gala for a major retailer and executed it flawlessly. My team of 20 worked from a sleek Little Rock office, and our reputation was ironclad. Clients like Walmart, right here in Arkansas, trusted me to deliver perfect events. That isn't a hobby, that's a legacy. But it wasn't just my work they misjudged. I lived in a penthouse downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Arkansas River. I bought it in cash 2 years ago. No mortgage, no debt. And that crack about no one marrying me, well, that hurt the most because I was engaged to Daniel Wright, my fiancé, a man who built his own tech startup from scratch. Daniel wasn't merely successful, he was a visionary, the kind of person who turns ideas into million-dollar deals. We'd met at a networking event I produced 3 years ago, connected over shared ambition, and got engaged last summer. He was my partner in every sense, always pushing me forward. We'd spent nights planning our life together, building a home, traveling the world. To think my parents imagined me as some lonely oddball was almost laughable, if it didn't sting so badly. The more I mulled over their words, the clearer the picture became. They'd constructed an entire narrative about me. In their version, I was the daughter who needed fixing, while Paige was the one to admire. They assumed I was floundering, that I'd end up crawling back to them for help, that Paige was the success story. It was as if they'd erased everything I'd achieved. I remembered the questions they'd asked about my work, their curiosity laced with pity. "How's your little business?" Mom would ask, her smile brittle. Dad would nod and suggest I consider something steadier, like Paige's media job. I'd shrugged it off as concern, but now I saw it for what it was. Condescension. They'd taken my accomplishments and twisted them into failure, probably telling relatives I was barely scraping by. I wanted to storm into their house and set the record straight. I could imagine walking in, listing my clients, showing bank statements, introducing Daniel. But that wouldn't do. They'd dismiss it, make excuses, or worse, double down. No, I needed something larger, something that would force them to see me. Not their caricature, but the real Charlotte Russell. I wasn't going to yell or beg for respect. I would demonstrate it, step by step, in a way that landed harder than any argument. My anger wasn't just about their words. It was about years of being underestimated, of giving them everything while they offered only judgment. I began to plot how to flip the narrative, how to make them face the truth in front of everyone who'd swallowed their lies. This wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. A couple of weeks later, I began to unravel the story they'd spun. The sting from that voice memo hadn't faded, but I'd converted it into fuel. I refused to let their falsehoods define me. Instead, I sketched a plan, 3 surgical phases to reveal who I really was. Phase 1. Gather intel to discover how far their tale had spread. Phase 2. Play the failing daughter they expected. Phase 3. Expose the truth at my sister's engagement party where they'd have no choice but to confront it. This wasn't about loud confrontations or private pleas. I wanted a moment that would land in front of everyone who'd heard their version of me. I grabbed a notebook and started outlining every step, every detail, as meticulous as planning one of my corporate events. Precision was my advantage, and I'd use it to turn their story inside out. My first move was to talk to my best friend, Courtney Lane. Courtney's been my rock since college, always on my side, and she works with me at Russell Events. I called her up and poured everything out. "They think I'm a mess," I said, pacing my office. "They're telling Paige I'm some charity case who'll never get her life together." Courtney didn't even hesitate. "They're blind," she said. "You've built an empire and they're too wrapped up in their own world to notice. You need to show them big time." Her words ignited something in me. She wasn't just comforting me. She was daring me to take control. We brainstormed over coffee, and she suggested I dig deeper into what my parents had been saying behind my back. "Talk to your family," she said. "Find out who else they've fed this garbage to." That was exactly the push I needed. My next move was to contact my aunt, Gloria Dunn. Gloria runs a boutique in Little Rock. Always stylish, always in the know. I drove to her shop on a quiet Tuesday, pretending I just wanted to catch up. Over tea, I eased the conversation toward family. "So how's everyone doing?" I asked casually. Gloria sighed, her tone soft but pitying. "Your mom's worried about you, Charlotte. Says you're struggling with that events thing, barely keeping it afloat." My jaw clenched, but I played along. "Oh, really?" What else did she say? Gloria hesitated, then admitted Mom had told her I was too quirky to settle down and needed to be more like Paige. It was like hearing the voice memo all over again. But now I knew it wasn't a one-time slip. They were spreading their version of me to the family, painting me as a failure. I wasn't done. I called my cousin Dylan Dunn, Gloria's son. Dylan's 25, a tech guy who practically lives behind a laptop. We met at a diner, and I got right to the point. "Dylan, have Mom or Dad said anything about me lately?" He looked uneasy, stirring his coffee. "Yeah. They mentioned you're having a rough time. Like financially and stuff. Dad said you might need a loan soon." There it was, confirmation. Their lies had spread beyond Paige. I pressed on, keeping my tone calm. "Did they say anything about my personal life?" Dylan nodded slowly. "They think you're kind of on your own. You know, not seeing anyone serious." I forced a smile, bearing the fury boiling inside. They'd built an entire fiction about me, and my own cousin believed it. Each conversation gave me another piece of the puzzle. I wrote everything down. Gloria's pity, Dylan's awkward responses, Courtney's advice. Each note became a weapon for Phase 3. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was determined. My parents thought they could rewrite my story, but I'd show them the truth. Not with tears or shouting, but with a plan that would leave them speechless. That's when I started thinking about Paige's engagement party, how it could be the perfect stage. I'd be there helping plan it, and they'd never see what was coming. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about reclaiming my story. A month into my plan, I was ready for Phase 2, convincing Mom and Dad that I was exactly the struggling mess they imagined me to be. Playing that part wasn't easy, but I was committed. I needed them to double down on their lie so I could capture everything. My first move was making a call I never thought I would. I dialed Mom's number, letting my voice tremble on purpose. "Hey, Mom, things have been kind of tight lately," I said, swallowing hard to sound desperate. "Could I borrow $50 for groceries?" There was a pause, then her voice shifted to that familiar mix of pity and superiority. "Oh, Charlotte, I knew this would happen," she said. "You can't keep up with that little business of yours. We'll send the money, but you really need to think about getting a stable job." I clenched my teeth and muttered a weak, "Thanks, Mom," before hanging up. But I'd hit record on my phone first. Arkansas allows single-party consent, so I was covered. Dad was next. I called him the same day, keeping my tone shaky. "Dad, I'm short on cash," I said, letting my voice crack. "Just need $50 to get by." He didn't hesitate. "This is why we told you to get a real career," he said, his voice dripping with disappointment. "You're too old to be chasing dreams. Look at your sister. She's got it figured out." I mumbled something about trying harder, my stomach twisting as I recorded every word. Their responses were exactly what I expected. Smug, judgmental, and laced with satisfaction, like they'd been waiting for me to fail. Each recording was proof, another nail in the coffin of their false narrative. I saved the files in a secure folder, each one labeled and dated. I knew they'd be crucial later. To make their story believable, I started pulling away from family events. The next weekend, there was a barbecue at my parents' house, a regular thing where everyone gathered. I texted Paige saying, "Sorry, work's been stressful. Can't make it." She replied with a simple, "Hope you're okay." But I could tell she believed it. A few days later, Mom called, inviting me to a cousin's baby shower. "I'm swamped with deadlines," I lied, keeping my tone heavy. "Maybe next time." She sighed, disappointed but not surprised. Exactly the reaction I wanted. "You're working too hard for too little," she said. "You should take a break and rethink your priorities." I recorded that too, my jaw tight as I played along. Every excuse I gave only fed their belief that I was falling apart, that my life was in disarray. It was working. They were buying every bit of it. Courtney became my anchor through all of this. I met her at a cafe in Little Rock, desperate to let it out. "I hate pretending to be this weak version of myself," I told her, stirring my coffee. "It feels like I'm betraying everything I've built." Courtney leaned forward, eyes sharp and determined. "You're not betraying anything," she said. "You're just playing their game better than they are. Stay focused. This will be worth it." She reminded me why I was doing this, not just to prove them wrong, but to reclaim my truth. We went over my notes, the recordings, the timeline. "You've got this," she said, squeezing my hand. "When the time comes, they won't know what hit them." Her confidence steadied me, giving me the strength to keep going even when it felt like I was losing a piece of myself. Every move I made was deliberate. I wasn't just pretending anymore, I was building evidence. The recordings, the skipped gatherings, the way I let Mom and Dad believe their own story, it was all leading up to the moment I'd flip their words back on them. I wasn't going to let their lies shape who I was anymore. I was preparing for something they'd never see coming, and I was ready to make it matter. As Paige's engagement party approached, my plan locked into place. I'd been playing the role of the struggling daughter for weeks, and now it was time to execute Phase 3, the big reveal. The party was the perfect stage, and I offered to manage all the planning for free, just like always. I designed custom invitations for Paige's event, elegant cards with gold foil details that screamed sophistication. I created signage for the venue, a 5-star hotel in downtown Little Rock, featuring modern fonts that matched the chic atmosphere. The decorations were my masterpiece, cascading floral arrangements, crystal chandeliers, and a photo wall that shimmered like art. Every detail was impeccable, the kind of work that made my company a favorite among major clients. I poured everything into it, knowing my parents would still find a reason to tear me down. And sure enough, they did. A week before the party, I visited their house to show them the designs. I spread the mock-ups across their dining table, expecting at least one approving glance. Instead, Mom pursed her lips. "These are cute, Charlotte, but a little amateurish, don't you think?" she said, turning toward Paige. Dad nodded. "It's nice you're trying, but this isn't exactly professional-level work." Paige stood silently, her eyes flicking between us. I swallowed my anger, forcing a polite smile. "I'll tweak them," I said, playing my part. Inside, I was boiling. My work had been featured in national blogs, praised by executives, and they still called it amateur in front of my sister. Later that night, I jotted their comments into my notebook, another piece of fuel for what was coming. While they continued to underestimate me, I was already building something bigger. I reached out to a contact at Arkansas Life, a local magazine known for its business and culture features. I'd worked with their editor, Sarah Mitchell, on a charity event the year before, and she'd been impressed by my company's success. I pitched her a feature story about Russell events, a Little Rock entrepreneur defying expectations. "We'd love to highlight you," Sarah said over the phone. "Your journey is inspiring." I asked her to schedule the release for the morning after Paige's party, ensuring my parents would wake up to it. The article would detail my $3.5 million business, my roster of high-end clients, and my rise from a modest startup to a regional powerhouse. It was the kind of proof they couldn't twist or ignore, and I made sure it was confirmed. Back at my office, I began crafting my speech for the party. This wasn't just a toast to Paige, it was my moment. I wrote with precision, every line carefully chosen to strike a chord without sounding vengeful. I wanted to reveal the truth, my success, my independence, the life they'd dismissed. I practiced in front of a mirror, keeping my tone calm and assured, making sure every word carried weight. Then came the recordings. I compiled the audio clips from my conversations with Mom and Dad, the ones where they'd lectured me about real careers and stable choices. I edited them into a short, powerful segment, just long enough to make a statement without overdoing it. I tested it on my laptop, picturing their faces as their own words echoed through the speakers. Everything was aligning perfectly, and I could feel the surge of confidence rising inside me. This wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about reclaiming my story once and for all. The night of Paige's engagement party, I stepped up to the microphone. The ballroom of the Little Rock Marriott buzzed with energy. Over 100 guests filled the space, surrounded by the very decorations I'd designed myself. The gold foil invitations, the cascading floral centerpieces, the elegant signage pointing guests toward the photo backdrop. Every detail bore my signature touch, a reflection of my work and talent. But I wasn't there to celebrate Paige. I was there to set the record straight. My heart pounded as I tapped the microphone, the chatter fading into silence. I took a steadying breath, my speech memorized, my plan ready to unfold. This was the moment I'd been preparing for months. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice clear and calm. "Before we toast my sister, I'd like to share something." I held up my phone, already synced to the venue's sound system. A few months ago, my parents accidentally sent me a voice memo meant for Paige. Let's hear what they really think of me. I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room, sharp and cold. "Charlotte's so eccentric. Her little events business is unstable. No one would ever marry someone like her." Then came my father's voice. "She's floundering. Paige, you're the one we're proud of." The crowd gasped, whispers spreading like wildfire. I stopped the clip, letting their words linger in the heavy air. My mother's face went pale. My father froze mid-sip, his glass trembling slightly. Paige stared down at the floor, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. But I wasn't done. "Since they brought up my personal life," I continued, turning to the side, "I'd like you all to meet my fiancé, Daniel Wright." Daniel stepped forward, tall and composed, his presence commanding attention. His tech startup was a household name in Arkansas. The crowd murmured, some breaking into applause as he waved. "Daniel's been my partner for years," I said with a smile. "And we're building a life together. So much for no one would marry me." I let the words hang before continuing. "As for my career, I run Russell Events, a company generating $3.5 million a year. We've handled events for Fortune 500 companies, including every decoration you see here tonight. The gold invitations, the floral displays, the signage, all of it done for free out of love for my sister." My voice grew stronger. "These so-called amateurish designs, as my parents called them, are the work of a team recognized by CEOs and industry leaders alike." But my parents told everyone I was struggling, that I needed Paige to guide me. They built a lie, and I'm done letting it stand. The silence that followed was electric. My mother opened her mouth, her voice trembling. "Charlotte, we didn't mean—" "You meant every word," I cut in, my tone firm. "And you didn't just say it once. You shared it with Aunt Gloria, with Dylan, with anyone who would listen. But tonight, everyone gets to see the truth." The audience looked stunned, some nodding in disbelief, others whispering behind their hands. Paige looked like she wanted to vanish, her fingers twisting nervously. My father's face burned crimson, his confidence shattered. I felt a wave of satisfaction, not joy but justice. Their hypocrisy had been exposed, and there was no undoing it. I hope you enjoy the party, I said finally, my voice calm but final. I put my heart into it, like I always have for this family. I set the microphone down, took Daniel's hand, and walked out. The murmurs followed us, but I didn't look back. The truth was out, and the weight I'd carried for years was finally gone. 3 months after that night, my life was completely different. Walking out of that ballroom hand in hand with Daniel, I'd felt lighter than ever. The truth was out, and I was done living under my parents' shadow. That night, I made a decision. No more contact with Edward and Pamela. They tried calling, texting, even sending a letter to my office, but I didn't respond. Their voicemails were full of apologies, excuses, claims they didn't mean it that way. I'd heard enough. I blocked their numbers and sent the letter back unopened. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about peace. For the first time, I wasn't seeking their approval. I was free. The fallout for Edward and Pamela came quickly. Aunt Gloria called a week after the party, her tone heavy with disbelief. "They've lost everyone's respect," she said. "No one in the family trusts them anymore." Cousins, uncles, even their close friends began keeping their distance, shocked at how they'd misrepresented me. Dylan texted me days later, admitting how manipulated he felt. "I had no idea you were doing so well," he wrote. "They made it sound like you were falling apart." Their reputation was ruined, and they had no one to blame but themselves. I didn't celebrate their downfall, but I couldn't deny it felt fair. They'd built a lie to tear me down, and in the end, it collapsed right on top of them. My career, on the other hand, was thriving. The Arkansas Life article dropped the morning after the party, just as I'd planned. Titled "Charlotte Russell, Little Rock's Event Powerhouse." It told my story in full, the $3.5 million business I'd built from the ground up, and my partnerships with elite clients like Walmart. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Within days, my inbox overflowed with new inquiries from corporations, nonprofits, and even a rising tech startup in Bentonville. That month alone, I signed 3 major contracts, including a national retailer's annual gala. My team at Russell Events had to expand, hiring 5 new employees just to meet demand. The article didn't just validate my hard work, it catapulted me into a new league. It opened doors I hadn't even knocked on yet, and for the first time, I truly felt unstoppable. A month later, Paige reached out asking to meet. I agreed, but only at a neutral spot, a quiet diner in downtown Little Rock. She looked uneasy, fingers twisting around her coffee mug. "I didn't know they were saying those things," she said softly. "I'm sorry, Charlotte. Can we fix this?" I studied her for a long moment. A part of me wanted to believe her, to forgive, but I couldn't forget how she'd stood there at the party, silent while their lies echoed through the room. "Paige," I said gently, "I love you, but I'm done with relationships that make me feel small. I need to surround myself with people who lift me up." Her eyes filled with tears, but I stayed firm. Self-respect wasn't up for negotiation, not even for family. I wished her well, paid for my coffee, and walked out. We haven't spoken since. Looking back, I realized something powerful. Standing up for yourself isn't just about calling out lies. It's about refusing to let anyone, even the people who raised you, define your worth. I'd spent years trying to earn Edward and Pamela's approval, hoping one day they'd finally see me. But their judgment was never about me. It was about their own insecurities and narrow view of success. Cutting them out wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I found strength in choosing myself, in building a life that reflects who I truly am. And if you're watching this, if you've ever been dismissed or underestimated, listen closely. You don't have to accept it. You have the power to rise, to walk away from anyone who dims your light, and to create a life that belongs entirely to you. Share your story in the comments below, and tell me, what would you have done in my place?